David is how he uses market data and trends to develop downtown economic strategies that really work, realistic strategies. Now, he doesn't know this, but he can't see us. But right now, if you look at the screen, we can see David's place in New York City, where he's speaking from as we speak. Sorry, David. So we're hiding here in Wisconsin with about 12 or 13 sites, and this site here is 35 participants, just eager to talk to you and listen to you. We're gonna be pretty quiet from our end. We're all eating lunch here and popping our soda cans, but we'll try to be quiet and mute our phones. I previewed David's materials and believe the information that he's going to present is not only timely, but well-focused for our communities throughout Wisconsin. This would be a great way to break open our 2010 webinar series. And with that, David, welcome to Wisconsin.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so very, very much for that introduction. I've been working for the last year on trying and see what the impacts have been of the Great Recession. And I've really come to the conclusion that a lot of things are going to be changing in our downtowns. But I think the key pivotal point that it's really critical for everybody to understand is how the consumer is going to be changing. And the name that I've given to this new consumer is the deliberate consumer. And I think it's important to understand that for the last decade, we've had a deviant time period of hyper-consumer spending. And it was primarily based on three sources of funding: the home piggy banks, credit cards, and diverted savings. And these are kind of disappearing. And while consumers have not stopped spending, they're still going to stores, they're still going to restaurants, etc., they're changing how they spend their money and why they spend their money. And it's really important, I believe, that downtown retailers and the downtown organizations that represent them really understand this new deliberate consumer if they're going to be able to respond appropriately. Now, the 20s were really, the 2000s were really tough for most Americans. And this was even before the Great Recession. Personal income growth was kind of flat, and employment growth was kind of flat as well. And then with the Great Recession, we took a big hit in net worth. Home values were once for many families, was their key asset. And they used it as a family piggy bank. They were generating out in 2006 and 2007 hundreds of billions of dollars based on the value for consumer spending out of their value of their homes. Now what we have is, in 2009, about 25% of homeowners are underwater, and a well-known economist, Mark Zandi, is predicting that by 2011, it's going to be 50%. And most of the experts that I've seen, they're saying that the recovery in home values will not take place before 10 years. If we look at the savings rate has gone up, and you'd think that was a great thing for us. And in a way it is. But what you have to remember is that those funds are not going into retailing. And while the savings rate did go up to about 6% for a while, the recent figures that were just published this morning by the Fed Reserve, it's down to about 3%, but that's 3% that's not going, again, into retail. And consumers are treating their credit cards quite differently. First of all, credit cards are harder to get, and their fees are higher, and the limits have been lowered. And consumers are trying to contract their credit, and surveys are supporting this. And actual credit card indebtedness has declined. Also of interest, I think, is the fact that debit card purchases now has reached about the same amount as credit card purchases. And to me, that sort of indicates that consumers are shifting away from what my British friends call the Never Never Land way of shopping to the pay-as-you-go way of shopping. And retail sales are bound to be impacted by the shoppers' lower credit card spending power and their more careful use of their cards. As I said before, job creation was slow in the 2000s, and in past recessions, we now have a track record that it's taken almost 5 years for lost jobs to be recovered. And what I've been reading, experts expect that it will take at least 5 years for us to recover from the job losses from the Great Recession. And job loss, or the concern about job loss, concern about your company's stability, we know that this impacts on a consumer's willingness to spend. One of the things that I noticed some years ago was that there are what I call sneaky necessities. And these are things like medical care, tuition fees and child care, and energy, especially like gasoline. And these were creeping along and accelerating way beyond the consumer price index even before the Great Recession, and they continue to increase during the recession. So consumers are facing these costs that are increasing continually, while their income is lower and their credit is reduced. So I got to say, show me the money. There was a recent survey done by the ICSC that some of my friends sent on to me, and because it seemed to indicate that consumers would be willing to return to their former robust spending patterns as the economy returned. But I've got to ask, where are they going to get the money for this? Where are they going to get the credit for this? Unless we get some of these key economic problems solved, and many of them predated the recession, I don't see they can have the money to, and they may have the will, the desire, but I don't see they're going to have the capability. So show me the money. And during the recession, the big value discounters, the big boxes, the Walmarts, etc., they continued a pattern that had predated the Great Recession, which was that their share of the GAFO, or the comparison shoppers market, just continued to grow almost inevitably, year in and year out, and that continued during the current recession. And by the way, if you look at this chart, which shows the trends for various types of retailing, the necessities, the things that people really needed, they stayed stable. But the big cost items, those that required credit, they took the biggest hit. The things like cars, major home and hearth purchases like furniture, etc. That's where you saw declines in sales and revenues. And even the magic of e-commerce was hit by the recession. We often hear e-commerce mentioned as if it's some magic solution to everything. They got badly hit in terms of the fall in their growth rate. It was even more than for the regular retailers. As looking to the future, looking at a number of other consulting reports and market research firms, it seems to us that the retail market will continue to kind of divide with those at the extremes, at the low end, the value discounters continuing to do very, very well and capture more market share, and the luxury retailers at the top, they'll be the ones who will probably rebound fairly well, although not as much as to the levels that were pre-Great Recession. We expect that the luxury will lose a substantial amount of trade from the trading up mass luxury traffic. Those that sell necessities will they always do well. People just need them, as necessities indicates. We think that the home and hearth group of retailing really went so low that they're in for a resurgence, significant resurgence, because people just need to do home maintenance. If they're going to stay where they are, there's going to be more need for remodeling, and there's this whole cocooning effect that generates a demand for things like HD TVs and seating and other equipment. But the demand will still be constrained there. Another group to watch is the pets, toys, hobbies, which grew going into the recession by almost 26%. And goods and services for children, they always stay fairly stable as well. And while we were not hot on the teen market as something the downtown should focus on during the recession, we think in the uptick that teen spending will increase, but even there it will be cautious. And who will be looking for retail space? Well, if you just look at the retail chains, the figures they're publishing these days, they're planning to open far fewer stores. And the share of those stores that have been going to downtown and Main Street locations are going to be even less than before. And so it's going to be the small independent retailers that will be sought after more and more in both large, medium, and small towns. But, one of the things that the small retailer has to confront, be a new one or an existing one, is where he's going to get the capital to open up a new operation. And that is a major challenge. Now, another category I've recently become aware of and appreciative of is what I call the Valhalla retailers. And these are people who decide that they want to live in a certain part of the country. And they move there, and then they decide, well, to support themselves, I'm going to open up a store. And so the market conditions for these retailers are less of a concern than the quality of life of the areas that they live in. And there, maybe in the question period, I can get into 2 or 3 examples. One is in Vermont, and another one is in Arizona. But some of you folks in Wisconsin have, tourist, high quality of life areas, you might be interested in these Valhalla retailers. Looking at now, how are consumer attitudes changing and their behaviors changing to reflect the economic context that they're living in? One thing is that research is showing more and more that their consumers are becoming more cautious and frugal. And I think most important is that need is becoming more important than want. And I think that's one of the key defining characteristics of the new deliberate consumer. And also consumers are looking for products that are simple, easy to use, and affordably priced. And here I give you some research done by McKinsey that shows different products and how many consumers want those products to be simple, easy, etc. And the flip camcorder and the netbooks, their popularity and success, I think also demonstrate this. They have few bells and whistles, but those few bells and whistles really work well, and they work easily, and the whole package is very affordably priced. I mean, to get a camcorder that you can send your movies up to YouTube, etc., for $200 or so,